Welcome back to another episode of Life's Ambition Podcast. Today we are joined by someone who has accomplished much in their career. He's going to give his input on becoming an attorney, investment banker, and being an owner in a global brand. Without further ado, Jim Dannhauser.
So, how are we doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a sunny day in North Carolina, so cannot complain there. I will say it's just moved to a new place, so the heat, it just had to happen all at the same weekend, and it decided to come down. And when it came down, it came down.
Yeah, well, North Carolina has a reputation for that.
Yeah, where are you at right now?
I live on Cape Cod in Massachusetts.
Oh, I have only heard great things about the Cape. Talked to someone named Ed Chatelains. He was in an episode recently, and he does real estate there, and he cannot stop saying good things about it. My grandparents cannot stop saying good things about it. So I think it's awesome that you're in the Cape. And, I'd love to kind of get into the conversation here today and get to know more about you. Like, how did this investment banking and being an attorney, where did it all start? Like, did you always kind of know that's what you wanted to do, or did it kind of come through time?
It came through time. When I graduated from law school in 1977, it was not my life's plan to end up doing what I did. I joined a big law firm in New York City, was working for a lot of corporate clients, including banks and investment banks. Spent some time for that firm in Japan for a year as they were trying to open up a Tokyo office.
In Japan, really?
Yeah.
Holy, that's awesome.
That was a lot of, it was a great learning experience, a challenge, but a lot of fun. And you grow a lot when you have to. When I came back, we were working for several different clients, and one of them approached me and said that they were looking to expand their in-house legal practice, and would I be interested in considering that? And also that I would have the opportunity to start doing some of their real estate investment banking business. So I did that because it seemed like a good opportunity. I knew the people well. I had good relationships with them. So that's how I made that switch over from the practice of law to beginning to work more in the financial field.
Well, now you mentioned you mentioned Japan and how it was definitely you're going to need to be learning a few things. What did you mean by that necessarily?
I was at the time, I was in my late 20s, had a lot to learn professionally and culturally. I had never lived outside of the United States before. I had never traveled outside of the United States before.
Oh, so this is a real wake-up call then.
So suddenly moving to Tokyo and living outside of the main part of the city, where my wife and I were the only non-Japanese people for miles and miles and miles around, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about culture. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about dealing with other people. So that's kind of the life lessons that we drew from that experience.
Now, bring me back a little bit what is the schooling like for these types of things? Like becoming an attorney, like obviously here you got to do your 4 years of undergrad, and then it's possibly 3 years, maybe 4 years of becoming an attorney.
Generally, the law school is 3 years.
Okay. All right. And then how does that kind of work? Are you selecting so like as a doctor, you select your type of field that you want to work in. Is it kind of the same thing as a lawyer? Or are you starting general broad of learning all the terminology of different things for the first 2 years, and then the third year you might choose what you want to specialize in?
Well, law school tends to be more general than specialized throughout the entire 3 years. There's a certain, some schools do it differently than others. I went to Harvard Law School. They have, at the time, I don't know what it is now, but at the time they had a very set curriculum for your first year. You took the mandated courses. In the second year, you got some selection capacity, and more significantly in the third. So
Hmm.
but it was more of a general grounding in the legal world. And then you sort of select out as you're graduating where you want to try to focus. And I had grown up in the New York area. I knew that, and my wife had grown up in the New York area. We knew that we wanted to move back to New York. And I decided that I would try to work at one of the big New York law firms, which I was lucky enough to be able to do.
Well, what's the learning curve like for going into law school? Because undergrad, it's pretty, for me at least, when I graduated, I just had kind of same writing skills. Some more were in report form, but when you're a lawyer, it's definitely a different way of thinking about things. How do you kind of switch your mind to be able to have that kind of dialect, because everything is very specific to what you say and what you write, because certain words can be used against you. How did you kind of wrap your mind around all of that? And what was the learning curve to it?
Well, first off, it helps to be a good writer to start because expressing yourself clearly in writing, no matter what your discipline, is a very important skill set.
Yeah.
And I had worked hard on developing that throughout my educational background. It wasn't just law school. Law school tries to train you in a different way of thinking logically and avoiding too much emotion. And then you just get out into the practice of law in a major law firm, and you're getting lots of training and lots of assistance because there's people there who've been through everything. And they have programs in place to try to help you to learn how to be a successful attorney inside of a large corporate practice. So that's the way I learned.
Gotcha. And you said that you did make it to the big time companies in New York. How did you get there? Because I'm assuming the interview process was not easy. I'm assuming being in New York itself is, I mean, for the amount of people there, just thinking about the job market in the area, I'm sure is even harder to get into.
Well, the big law firms have a tradition of recruiting. So they will actually go to the top law schools and recruit to try to attract good students to come work for them.
So there's a lot of internships and stuff.
Well, especially what many of the big firms have are programs in which they will hire second-year students for the summer to work with them in a summer associate program. So they can see how people act. They can see whether people have good potential. And then at the end of the summer, if you've done reasonably well, they'll offer you a full-time position upon your graduation. So that's what I did.
Gotcha. And what firm did you go to?
I went to a firm, it's Kelly, Dry, and Warren.
Sweet. That's awesome. Well, I mean, congratulations to that, because that's no easy feat to be able to transition to a big firm. I know they obviously select high-level people, but to even get to that point is still very impressive. So congratulations to you on that. And how did you start out? Like in your first few years, were you mostly doing the grunt work, or were you working on any cases, or what was kind of going on?
Well, I never went into litigation, so
Okay.
I wasn't really working on cases. At any organization, you start at the bottom, you're going to do grunt work. That's just part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also given an opportunity to do more than that. So we, for example, represented a client who was in the corporate trust business, and they served as trustee of big bond issues. And so as a young associate, you would get exposed to those kinds of transactions and have an opportunity to participate in them.
What does that necessarily mean?
I'm sorry?
What does that necessarily mean, the bond, or like the bond issues?
Well, when a public company issues debt, and you can issue debt or you can issue stock. And the debt are called bonds. So if General Motors wants to go to issue bonds in the public bond market, which they do, that's what a bond is. So they will borrow money at a certain rate for a certain period of time, and they will issue those bonds through an underwriter, and they will be purchased by usually institutional investors, whether that's Fidelity, Federated, or those types. And so that's what a bond is.
Isn't that what a lot of utility companies will use as well? Is when they're building plants, they'll ask you to buy in bonds and then they pay them out, I guess you could say, in the end for you.
They pay over time, sure. But companies of all sorts do bond issues regularly. It's a regular feature of the U.S. capital markets.
Okay. And then I guess, is it better? Why should people want to invest in taking the bonds? Because this is like a kind of a newer thing to me that I have not familiarized myself with.
Well, as I said, it's usually institutional investors, whether those are money market funds or big investment funds run by big investment managers. But why would any individual invest in a bond? Well, you establish a portfolio, you want to be diversified. You want to have a certain amount of equity exposure in stocks. You want to have a certain amount of fixed income exposure, is what it's called, whether that's U.S. Treasury bonds or private corporate bonds or others. So it's just part of a general investment strategy.
Gotcha. And how long were you in this space for? Because I know you obviously went to investment banking, but how long were you in as an attorney for?
Even when I went to the investment bank, I was still functioning as an attorney for part of my responsibilities.
Okay.
But with the law firm, I was there for about 6 years.
6 years. Wow. And for most people, they're not able to handle that kind of pressure. How did you manage your stress levels? How did you manage your working time? How did you basically incorporate what most people call as the life balance?
Yeah, well, I hate to be glib, but I think life balance is a fiction. Generally, when you're starting out in a career and you're trying to establish some level of financial security for yourself and your family, you're going to work a lot of hours. So what my wife and I did, we decided that we would not spend any time in a social circuit. We did not go to parties. We did not do any. So weekends, except where I had to work weekends, which was often, were for the kids. And that was the balance we chose.
Yeah, I mean, my dad will say a lot about how. So my dad he was a physical therapist. He worked a ton of hours. He'd be up at 5 a.m. when he get back till like 8 p.m. at night. Yep. But it helped set us up to where the position where we are today, and like even like my parents' position, to be able to do the things we wanted because he sacrificed that time early on to become a manager and then regional manager and so on and so forth. So very fortunate that he did that. And to be honest, I don't remember a lot of my childhood. So I just very much value the time more now with him than I did then. So I'm glad he went through the struggle then than he has to now. And I'm sure you kind of feel the same way where, growing up, maybe it was nice to spend the time with the kids that what you could spend the time with, but you've much value sacrificing then so that you can do a lot more with them when they're older.
I think that's true, but you can also take that too far. So, I made sure to participate in my kids' athletic activities. I coached them frequently. As I said, we spent most of our time on weekends revolving around our kids and their activities.
Now, did your career path involve doing weekends, like working a lot of weekends and stuff like that?
Oftentimes, yes.
Yeah. So that can be even a challenge in itself there too. So
and a lot of travel.
Oh yeah, because so you said you were in Japan for a year,
mm-hmm.
And where else did you travel?
Well, once I got out into the investment banking and financial advisory world, and ultimately with private companies, traveled all over, all over the United States, Mexico, Canada, Europe.
Like throw a dart at a board, you pretty much have gone there.
Probably.
Holy cow. And how long would you be gone for? Would it be a lot of conferences? Would it be meeting with different corporate entities?
Well, it would be all kinds of things. Like, for example, we had operations throughout the United States, Mexico, Canada, and Europe. So you'd be going to visit those operations, meet with the financial people there. You'd be going to meet with investors. You'd be going to meet with bondholders. You'd be going to meet with potential acquisition targets. Also conferences, because part of the job of a public company chief financial officer is to represent the company at various investment conferences that will take place, because you want to continue to keep the company's name in the public markets. So it's all of that. But the trips would vary in length. I used to joke that every place I went might as well have been Des Moines, Iowa, because they all look the same. I wasn't a tourist. I wasn't spending any extra time. I'd, get there, get my business done, and get out.
Fair enough. I mean, especially if you're going for so long, you're going to want to get back to your family and stuff. And so, but was there?
And anybody who says they enjoy business travel is not really telling the whole truth. It's not a lot of fun.
I would know people. So, my brother, his buddy's dad, he would travel all the time for work, and he was in Ireland for a business trip. And so he would always spend an extra day wherever he went just to go play golf or just do something to experience the area. I mean, have you ever thought about trying that at all? Or was it mostly like, all right, I'm here to do my thing. Maybe I might go check out a festivity outside of the conference or meeting with potential acquisition or something, and then just go home.
No, I just went home.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, we had, over the course of a period of time, we had 5 children.
Yeah.
So, my golf club sat in the garage for a long time because I couldn't keep the hours I kept and then come home on a Saturday morning and say, I'll see you, in 6 hours. That just didn't make any sense.
Well, hopefully you're able to pull out the golf clubs now and get a few whacks.
I do. I play with Mark almost every week.
That's awesome. Yeah. So speaking of Ireland, was there maybe a few weeks ago golfing with my brother, my dad, and then like the guy who spends an extra day wherever he kind of goes. And I'm not even kidding, probably some of the hardest courses I've ever even played at. I know they're world renowned, but if you ever get the chance to go play golf in Ireland or somewhere else in Europe, highly recommend it, because holy cow, I was ready to throw a club, which I have lost a club from throwing it, but I was ready to throw one. But to go back to it is, so you're an attorney, you did investment banking, but you were also an attorney at the same time. When did becoming is investment banking also part of being a financial advisor as well? Or is it separate?
Now, when I say financial advisor, I'm not talking about somebody who gives investment advice to individual people.
Okay.
It's a financial advisor to companies and to businesses.
So kind of like what you're doing for SCORE right now, where you're helping out, like you're giving advice to potential startup businesses, or?
People generally will talk about somebody being a financial advisor to businesses really in the context of helping them to figure out how they should deal with their capital structure. Should they borrow money from a bank? Should they issue bonds? Should they issue debt? Should they make acquisitions? How will they fuel their growth? So it's not really providing mentoring advice to small businesses. It's helping businesses in a significant growth spurt, and you're actually helping them to access the capital, which SCORE does not do.
And so what would you say are probably your biggest piece of advice that you gave companies when it came to, let's just say, acquisitions, or even them going to get a loan and being in debt? Is it very much you don't want them to be in debt? Like it's very tough for that? Or like?
No, most companies, if they're looking to grow and to make acquisitions, are going to be taking on debt. But the idea is to try to structure the balance sheet such that the company has the ability to manage its debt, to make sure it can meet its obligations and to avoid any liquidity problems.
What do people mostly, or like, what do companies mostly go in debt for? Is it buying more building space so then they can acquire more workers and get more revenue from having just more people on it? Or is it something completely different than what I'm thinking?
It's just debt is just part of the capital structure of a company, right? So, if a company has zero debt outstanding, but it could borrow at 5% interest, it's able, therefore, to free up more cash flow for, if they're able to grow, for additional growth opportunities, payments to shareholders, et cetera. So companies use debt for all manner of different things: acquisitions, stock buybacks, just part of an overall capital structure.
And what would you say is the overall capital structure? If you just had to like make a broad, I guess, structure on it, what would you say it is?
Well, you can't. I mean, because it's different for every company in every industry. A company that is in a rapid growth phase may have a higher level of debt than a company that is more mature and isn't looking to grow. So it's not a one size fits all optimal circumstance. It's a function of the particular issue, the particular business, the particular industry, its growth profile, its shareholder profile. There's just not one simple answer to that question.
Where did you become, with all this knowledge, you eventually became the CFO one day. When was that, and who were you the CFO for?
But what happened was that part of the work that I was doing in the financial advisory field, I was working with someone I had come to know, an individual, and he was working for a family that owned several different businesses. And one of them was a real estate company, and they were looking to try to reorganize that company, sell off some of the real estate, and focus their efforts on the theme parks that the company owned. So they asked me to join the board of directors. This was in the early 90s, which I did. And then the company was able to go through some significant growth, and they asked me to consider becoming its chief financial officer, which I did in 1995 or so. So that was just a natural progression. It came about through existing relationships with people who had a need and felt that I could fill it. And it seemed to me to be a good opportunity to work with some very high quality people and execute on a significant opportunity. So we took that company public 1 year later, and it continued to grow. When I joined the company, we had 6 theme parks. By the time that I left the company, we had 39 parks in markets throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Europe.
That's extremely impressive. Like, congratulations to that.
Don't congratulate me. It was a big team of people doing a lot of work.
Yeah, well, how do you, as the CFO, how do you build something like that? How do you work with the CEO or the owner or just whoever?
Well, the CEO became a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And is one of my best friends to this day.
That's awesome.
And so, we worked very well together. And the chief operating officer also became a very good friend of mine. So, you have a lot of camaraderie and you work together to build the organization and to grow it.
How do you, I guess, get that direction? Is it prioritizing certain pieces of, all right, we're going to invest where we know the market's hot. Let's go in these locations. And then you work with the CEO, you're now current or one of your best friends now, and they kind of have the vision of how it's going to go. and stuff like that? How does the operating process work?
Well, the first thing you do is you focus on geography, right? Where are you and where do you want to be? And the second thing is you react to opportunities because, when people know that you are in an acquisition mode, opportunities come your way if people are looking to exit or looking to sell. And also, both the chief operating officer and the chief executive officer in particular had very deep contacts in the industry.
That helps.
So they were able to identify opportunities and seek them out, and then we would go and try to execute on them.
What are you in charge of as the CFO? I know obviously you're the financial officer. It's a lot of numbers dealing, but in a company that you are growing, what is your responsibility exactly?
Well, it's going to be different for every company. Different people fill different roles depending upon the circumstances. For us, my primary overall responsibility was to make sure that we were appropriately capitalized to be able to take advantage of the opportunities and execute on them intelligently. And to make that required a significant effort in the capital markets, both raising equity and raising debt. I also was responsible for supervising our bank loan relationships. And then you had all the internal operations, all of the financial statements that have to get generated, all of the controls that have to be executed in financial control setting. Think about theme parks where you have a lot of cash transactions going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where you have retail operations, food operations, entertainment operations. So all of that has to be controlled and managed carefully. So I was ultimately responsible for all of that.
And be honest with me, Jim, are we talking about Six Flags here? Is this the acquisition of Six Flags?
I was even before the acquisition of Six Flags, but Six Flags certainly was a part of the acquisition process, yeah.
Holy cow. When did you guys acquire Six Flags? And how did that even work? Because, I grew up always going to Six Flags.
Well, Six Flags was a big chain. They had parks in a lot of major markets, from New York to Los Angeles to Dallas to Chicago to Atlanta. And so we always felt that would be a great opportunity for us to grow significantly. And it was owned at the time by Time Warner, together with a private equity firm out of Boston called Boston Ventures. So we approached them. And Time Warner realized that it wasn't really a key part of their strategic business. And so they indicated they would be interested in considering a transaction, and we were able to execute on it.
Cool. That's so cool. Yeah, and, literally growing up, I think me and a few buddies would go every year, and we love Six Flags. How long did you hold on to it for before you sold?
Didn't sell.
Didn't sell. Oh.
No. It's been sold now, but it was sold well after I left.
Gotcha. How many parks did you get then after the acquisition? Did you guys increase the size of Six Flags? I know it was a major chain at that point, but
well, we rebranded some of our existing parks as Six Flags parks.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So that included a park in Denver, a park in the greater San Francisco market, park up in upstate New York, and other locations. So every time that we had the opportunity to put a Six Flags brand on one of our parks, we would do that.
Sweet. And how is revenue in the theme park space? Because obviously I'm assuming if you have rainy days on the weekend, it can be really tough. Or if it's cold, you might get a lot less visitors. So you're really focused on spring, summertime, maybe a little bit of fall, but the winter can be difficult in some locations. How do you did you guys manage those aspects in different ways, or what kind of happened there?
Well, first off, most of the regional theme parks are different than the Disney and Universal parks. They don't operate on a 365-day-a-year calendar.
Okay.
They operate weekends in the spring and fall, and 7 days a week, really from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And the calendar will vary depending upon the market.
Gotcha.
So you're not really affected by the cold weather. Obviously, rain is a challenge. So you have to make sure that you do everything you can to maximize the performance when the weather is good. And of course, we're in enough markets where you're going to get diversification so that, a bad weather day in one market will generally be offset by a very good weather day in another market.
Gotcha.
And over the course of the whole operating season, things generally tend to smooth themselves out.
Interesting. And it's also, I'm sure, different from Disney, and more the fact that most of the people that are going to these places are local people versus out of towners. So they're not traveling all this way to
Correct.
go to a place.
And they're not on vacation.
Yeah.
For some people, it is a mini vacation. But most of the attendance will come from people who live within 150 miles of the park.
Really?
Yeah.
But that's still a big range too, because that's over 3 hours for some people. But yeah. I guess I growing up traveled 2 hours, so that makes total sense then. And what was one of the most satisfying aspects for working in the theme park business for you?
It was just it was a very exciting time to be able to be a part of such a significant growing opportunity.
Is that more just because people were starting to get more known to the theme park aspect of wanting to go have a good time and then leave for a day?
No, it was growing the business of our company.
Oh, okay. And then what would you say is probably the biggest piece of advice that you would give others getting into the attorney or investment banking space, or even just owning a business in general?
Well, I think number one is to be realistic. Number two is to work hard, and always be prepared to put in the extra effort, because it takes a lot of extra effort to be successful.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jim. I really do appreciate you being on the episode today. It means a lot. And I hope you have a great rest of your week here.
Thanks a lot, Drew. Good to meet you. Take care of yourself.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today's episode. I'm fortunate enough to share these amazing people with you. If you'd like to support the show, you can follow our Patreon, which can be found going through our website link listed below, or place a 5-star rating depending on what platform you are listening to. Thanks again, and catch you in the next episode.